Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Mast, and welcome back to the 5.16 Smite patch notes. This is a fairly small patch, but I thought it was still probably worth going into it for a video. We do have a new item, we do have some god changes, and we do have some pretty cool skins that for once I feel like I might actually be able to recommend to you guys. So, real quickly, we'll just look through the skins they're adding. They are adding Chef Vulcan finally. This was a community suggestion that has been in the works for a long time. A lot of people are excited for it. Chef Vulcan looks very, very good. And so that'll be a fun skin to look forward to. Midnight Raven Isis is actually pretty cool. Isis, I think, getting her first actually decent skin. Isis doesn't really have a whole lot of skin options. Admiral Wukong, personally, not really a fan, except for the fact that the man has a boat for his ultimate. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out. I will give you guys a timestamp link to the skin section for the patch notes that Hi-Rez did in the description for the video. Tier 5 Bologna is coming out, and it's actually looking pretty good. A lot of people seem a little underhyped for this skin. I think it's actually pretty dope. Voice pack is a little meh, but I think the skin itself is pretty damn cool. Heatsink Pele is Pele's first real skin. This is actually looking pretty cool as well. And then Titanium Tracker Shipalake, meh. It's kind of not too exciting. So we've got some miscellaneous changes, some bug fixes. We can skip through those. Really nothing too important, I don't think. And on to the new item, Berserker Shield. So in 5.14, Hi-Rez wanted to try and create a basic attack addition to Gladiator Shield so that those warriors in the solo lane could get, you know, a basic attack option. Gladiator Shield wouldn't be quite so ability based, right? So they wanted to put that in. It felt like it was too strong. They took it out. And instead we now have a new item. So Berserker Shield, 25 power, 15 physical protection, 15% attack speed. Hitting an enemy with a basic attack restores 1% health and mana. Basic attacks that hit all enemies in melee range restore 0.5% health and mana on every enemy after the first. So this is different than Gladiator Shield. Gladiator Shield is specifically on gods, and it is larger heals on those gods. So let's say we're looking at one of the more extreme examples of Gladiator Shield. Let's talk about Cuchulainn. So in lane with Gladiator Shield, you can get about 20% health sustain from a full rotation of Cuchulainn's cooldowns. You can get your 1, your 2, your 3, your ult, stance switch, and then 1, 2, 3 ult. Now, the 2 won't change, so it's actually 17.5%, but 1, 3 ult on the Rage Dance of Cuchulainn. And that's an incredible amount of healing. That 17.5% is really, really strong, and Berserker Shield shouldn't match up to that sort of burst that you can get, especially in team fights where you can hit multiple Gladiator Shield procs on different people. But in terms of reliable sustain, Berserker Shield should be really, really good, continuing to hit auto attacks and continuing to bring back health. Whenever you're auto attacking consistently and boxing consistently in lane, you're going to get large amounts of health back. The downside being you don't have a statistically strong item. So 25 power is okay, but 15 protection, really weak for a tier 3 item, and 15% attack speed is decent for aggressive stats, but again, not good for tanky stats. So Berserker Shield going to be an interesting item. It's going to set you very, very vulnerable for ganks if you're going the second item. If you are going at third item, then your sustain's coming online a little bit later. It's a little bit less of a laning phase item, but you could be getting a breastplate, a mystical mail, a Genji's, a pestilence, whatever, some sort of tanky item to help you in lane to keep your health up and stuff like that. So it's an interesting addition. I don't think it'll be overpowered. The sustain, like I said, is very, very strong, but you're so vulnerable to ganks with this item. Gladiator Shield is so much safer because you get so much more protection out of it. So that's the big downside to it. I think it'll actually be okay. I'm kind of excited to see what'll happen with that. Gem of Isolation. Decreased health from 250 to 200. Just a little nerf to Gem, which is a pretty strong item right now. It's got a lot of power. It's got a decent amount of health. It obviously has a strong passive, so I think that's a good change. Mystical Mail, I'm pretty excited for. Adding 20% crowd control reduction. Crowd control reduction is probably the most underrated stat in Smite, and I say that as somebody that specifically never buys it, or that never specifically buys it. Crowd control reduction is just one of those things where there's plenty of games where you could use it and people don't think about it. And adding 20% onto Mystical Mail makes a lot of sense. One of the things that really limits Mystical Mail is crowd control. When you can keep that person who wants to be up in your face, when you can keep him at range, when you can root him away, when you can stun him away, and do those different CCs to kind of limit their tankiness, not their tankiness, their frontline, their aggressive, you know, melee range attacks and stuff like that. Holding them away really hurts Mystical Mail because obviously it's basically, you know, it's a close kind of melee range aura. And so 20% crowd control reduction will help Mystical Mail do what it does. And then obviously stat-wise boost the item without making the passive broken, without making the regular stats broken. It's a really nice change in my opinion. I think it's a really good addition to the item. Rage, small little buff, decreased cost from 2,500 to 2,400. Basically, this is putting Rage back where it used to be. So I don't really have an opinion on this. I think Rage was honestly fine, but I don't really care too much about this. It's not too big of a deal. Talisman of Energy, decreased cost from 2,250 to 2,150. This is an item we are not seeing a whole lot of, and so decreasing cost a little bit to try and get people to purchase it a little more often. On to God Balance. Agni decreased damage on his ultimate from 160 to 300 to 140 to 300. This is a very good change for Agni in my opinion, because what they're doing is they are limiting the early game base damage of his ultimate, and that's something that we're really seeing too much of right now. When Agni hits 5 and he's getting these ultimates online, if you stack bombs on somebody, you're getting 480 base damage, which is just nasty. Like, there aren't many abilities that compare to that, and the ones that do are things like Kukulkan ult, which are, in my opinion at least, easier to juke and obviously less versatile, where Agni has 3 separate bombs that he can choose to do what he wants with. Apua is actually getting nerfed. Now, it's worth noting that with the Corpse Explosion nerf, where they're decreasing the initial damage, we'll get to that in a second, actually. Undead Surge increased cooldown from 12 seconds to 14 seconds. Corpse Explosion decreased the initial damage from 90 to 170 to 60 to 100. Keep in mind, this is the initial damage, not the explosion damage. So what that means is basically if you hit the 2 without having corpses in the area, and this includes when there are corpses in the area, the damage you get from purely the 2 is nerfed from what it used to be. And like they say, this change was in update 5.13, but it was not included in the patch notes. So it's already in the game. It's already in Apua as is, but they wanted to go ahead and note it because they forgot to before. And Empty the Crypts, increasing the cooldown from 90 to 100. So the reason they're doing this is because he's having a lot of success in the other modes, in the modes like Clash and Assault, which, you know, obviously you can't pick him in Assault, but he's good in Assault. So Clash, Assault, Joust, Arena, those modes like that, where they're larger, lane-based, or even open modes, not like Conquest, where he really has that specific role that he doesn't fit too well into. So still not good in Conquest, or at least not popular in Conquest, but he is getting nerfed for those other modes. Obviously, that sucks for anybody that wants to play him in Conquest. That sucks for me, because I'm trying to do an A to Z on him, but I will hopefully get it out before the nerf, so that'll help me a little bit. But yeah, they are nerfing Apua. I think the reasons are okay. I think obviously the problem here is Apua needs to be changed for the better. Apua needs to be reworked at least a decent amount, because clearly it's a problem where he is really good in other modes, if people know how to play him, and bad in Conquest and just doesn't make much sense in Conquest. So hopefully we'll see some changes there. Apollo. I'm excited for this. I know some people hate Apollo. I love Apollo. I'm excited for these buffs. So increased Mesmerize duration from 0.7 to 2.3 to 1.1 to 2.3. Basically, kind of like the Agni change, but reverse, where they're buffing the early game for him by a decent amount. That's 0.4 seconds on the level 1 Mez. I think that's a good change. Mez is really weak level 1. It didn't used to be, if I remember right. I think it used to be like a straight up second or something like that. So I think they nerfed it and now they're buffing it back. But I personally am excited about that. The late game Mez where it's 2.3 is not getting changed. That's fine as is. They could even bring it down a little bit. But the 0.7 to 1.1 is really helpful for him in the early game. And the 3 gets a really nice early game buff. Increased movement speed from 5 to 25% to 15 to 25%. It's a really, really big change for him, where he's getting a very strong buff to his mobility when he's using his dash now. Chaac has a pretty cool change coming. I'm excited about this. Chaac is a god that's a little bit underwhelming, a little too simple, and so they're adding a little nice change to him that will help him be a little more interesting, a little more brain going into Chaac, right? So Overflow, his passive, in addition to allowing the next ability cast to cost 0 mana when fully stacked, which is what it did before, which it will still do, whatever ability is fired to consume the stacks has its cooldown reduced by 2 seconds. So the way to think about this is if you have your passive stacked up on Chaac, your Overflow stacked up, and you throw your axe, boom, axe goes down, you take 2 seconds off of the cooldown of that axe cooldown. So axe cooldown, I think, is normally 10 seconds, probably. I think it's 10, right? Probably 10 seconds. So that 10 seconds goes to 8 seconds. That's a pretty big change for Chaac. I mean, he's basically getting 20% additional cooldown on that ability. Obviously, you can use it on your others as well. You could use that on your ultimate, although you probably don't want to. You could use it on your 2, you could use it on your 3. The 3 is another one to think about a lot. Honestly, all of them are ones to think about a lot, but the 1, really good for poke, continue to poke out in lane. The 2, really helpful if you're kind of in trouble. Normally Torrent, his 2, is really helpful for trying to escape in fights. It's one of those things where you can throw your 1, kind of run away from the enemies chasing you, and then 2 to it, or kind of get them to go towards the axe and then not 2 to it, and they have to go chase you down again. So whenever you're getting caught, that could be helpful. And then obviously getting the lower cooldown on your 3 could be helpful as well. Wukong, getting some buffs. Thank you. Thank you. Please buff the Wukong. Increased bonus damage to minions in jungle camps from 25% to 30% on Magic Cudgel. I don't know for sure, but I think this is probably just a perfect little boost to help his 1 in clearing wave. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure in my little bit of experience playing him, he's just kind of at this little awkward point where he doesn't quite clear wave a lot of the time, and that should help him out with that. Obviously, the jungle camp, not quite as big of a deal, but for minions, that'll be pretty nice. Big buff to Master's Will, decreasing cooldown from 12 seconds to 10 seconds. Back in the days when Wukong was stronger, Master's Will was 10 seconds. They went ahead and nerfed him, put it to 12, and it is now going back to 10. That's a really big deal for Wukong. I mean, they're taking off basically a 1/6 of the cooldown on that. That's a really big difference. It's a really big buff to his cooldown reduction. So really nice change there. And 72 transformations buff the early game damage of Ox form from 50 to 210 to 70 to 210. The way Pon put it was basically that a lot of the time, even if it made sense to level the Ox at level 3, and realistically at level 4 too, it tended to not really work out. It tended to not be worth, because you did so little damage with the Ox form that even if you're disrupting somebody, even if it has some sort of counter to the person you're against, you got so little damage out of it that it wasn't worth. And it's worth noting that when you're using it that way, you're also taking wave aggro. So a lot of the time it's one of those abilities where you're getting tiny little bit of damage, you take wave aggro, you kind of get punished for it because wave does more damage to you than you do with the actual ability damage. So nice little change there. Makes sense. Poseidon, final change here. This is a weird one. Poseidon Ultimate, the one change I'm still a little bit confused on how it worked. Basically, it sounds like Tidal Surge didn't quite match up with the effects. It looked like it was higher than it was, and it was not. And going along with that, Kraken ranked up the knockup height as you leveled it up. That was not intentional. That it was not known. But you could go from 300 to 400 in knockup height. They are changing it to 375 at all ranks, which means you get a higher knockup now with level 1 Kraken and so on, but a slightly smaller knockup with the final rank Kraken. And it should make it more reliable to hit enemies with Tidal Surge your 1. So weird change for Poseidon. I am not a Poseidon main at all. I play him very little. I'm sure some people that play him a lot have kind of noticed this, but maybe not realized it, where Poseidon is not reliable with his ultimate and his 1. Having played him just a little bit, I have noticed Poseidon is not too reliable with his ultimate and his 1. So they're trying to make it more reliable. They are fixing things that are kind of buggy with it. So really, this is closer to a bug fix than anything, but nice little change for Poseidon, making him a not broken character, I guess. But that is the patch, guys. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one.
I've been seeking for the glory. Say my name. And I've been trying to write my own story in the search for fame. I'm sitting here in this empty room, walls keep tumbling down.